Hello, folks. Welcome to the Genuinely Interested podcast. I'm your host, Roy Bensby. This podcast is an opportunity for me to speak with some of the most interesting people I know, either with amazing talents or achievements or unbelievable life stories or just invaluable insights into areas which they have dedicated their lives to studying. I sit down with these amazing individuals from across the planet and I try to ask them questions that will hopefully help you, the listener, extract something valuable or learn something new or just hopefully get inspired by. You can find all the episodes for the podcast on all the major podcasting platforms such as iTunes, Spotify, Google, Overcast, iHeartRadio, literally all of them. It's there. If you love the show, if it adds value to your life in any way, shape, or form, please leave reviews on iTunes. It really helps grow the podcast. It puts it up there so more people can see it. You can also find all the episodes and everything else, all the information that's updated regularly on the website, which is roybentzvi.com, ROYBENTZVI.com, and you can sign up for updates as well. Also been updating the YouTube channel, so I've been uploading old episodes pretty much on a daily basis, so you can find it there. And in the future, I hope to make video podcasting as well. If that's something you guys want to check out and are interested in, please shoot me email. I'd love to hear from you. And also make sure to check out the social media platforms, Instagram and Twitter. I post there daily. And lastly, if you guys want to support and help grow the podcast, please go to Buy Me a Coffee or Anchor or Patreon. It is an endeavor to grow this podcast and make it what it should be. And it takes a village. So I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. I see that there are literally listeners from all over the world in each and every country. So thank you to everyone and on to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to the podcast. This week we have Ray Zahab, who is a Canadian explorer, ultra distance runner, and founder of nonprofit Impossible to Possible. This was a very energetic, very interesting podcast where I tried to get as many insights as possible into the main mental mindset and the mental framework that you have to have when doing these ultra distance runs. I mean, he's crossed pretty much all land possible, from deserts to Arctic areas in Russia and the South Pole and the North Pole, driest places, wettest places. He's gone everywhere. That takes, I think, in my opinion, a special type of mindset. And I really tried to get to the core of that in this conversation. And yeah, this was a great conversation with Ray. We covered why he got into it in the first place, how the whole thing kind of snowballed into what it is today. We talked about his charity work that he does. And again, just about the type of mindset that you have to have while doing these type of ultra distance runs. He focuses mainly on running. So between running the entire world, I'm glad I was able to catch him for an hour or so to sit down and have this lovely conversation. So I hope you do enjoy it. And without further ado, here is this week's guest, Ray Zahab. Enjoy the show, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Hey, Ray.
Hey, good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. We're having the polar vortex right now. In Canada, we've been getting a lot of polar vortex this year. It's been really interesting. It's not that bad. It's like minus 20 Celsius.
That's pretty cold.
It's cold, but I mean, listen, for you guys, well, you're in upstate New York.
Yeah.
So you can get some cold weather. I'll tell you where you get real cold weathers in those mountains in New Hampshire.
The cold. I think in New Hampshire, in Mount Washington, is the highest recorded wind, right? Ever recorded, I think.
Something like that, yeah. Well, I've been up Mount Washington in winter, and it is cold.
It's cold.
It can be cold, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, New England is notoriously cold, but I don't think, maybe up in parts of Vermont, Maine, maybe. Otherwise, I don't think we hit a lot of minus 20 Celsius days up here.
No, No, maybe not anymore, but there was a time for sure, you know?
Yeah. Well, everything's getting warmer now. The seasons are starting later. It kind of sucks. Like before, you could go skiing like around November. Now it's like late December, early January, and then it's kind of stretches out to like April. Some places
Yeah.
May.
Yeah, I
Everything's
know, it's
moving.
weird. It's like a big cycle, you know? It's
Yeah,
like everything's just sort of turned.
yeah,
So,
All right. So you are a very interesting individual. That's why I wanted to have you on. How do you have like some word or a phrase or something that you categorize yourself? Are you just an adventure
like,
person?
it's I've been at this so long now. I mean, I don't even know. I was talking to a buddy about this morning, and obviously you and I'll get into it a little bit about how I'm sure some of the questions will be, how did I get into doing what I do? I'm an explorer. That's what I do, and so, I mean, it sounds like an old throwback 1800s pith hat and jodhpurs kind of term, but anyhow, I mean, it's basically what I do. I as well, you had mentioned before we started recording that you're, as well, an entrepreneur. I do some things in that space as well that are all adventure related. But, for the most part, that's what I'm doing. I mean, that's, exploration in various capacities.
And you've done it, but so the difference between you and a lot of other people, there's skiing, canoeing, some bicycles, everyone has their way that they like to explore. There's a lot of different adventurers and explorers out there, but you run.
Yeah,
So
so I like to run and be on foot in really remote places. So at this point now, I'm somewhere around 18,000 kilometers that I've crossed on foot.
woo,
Most of the large deserts. So for example, the Sahara Desert, we ran across over 7,000 kilometers. I crossed the Gobi Desert, it was over 2,000 kilometers. The Atacama Desert, 1,200 kilometers, so on and so forth. And then as well, I like to do winter Arctic expeditions for the most part, or those colder places. So I've been to the South Pole unsupported. I've done numerous Arctic expeditions, Siberia, Kamchatka, these kind of places that I like to be in the Arctic, as it relates to the Arctic anyhow, and Siberia. I love being in these places in the middle of winter because I love sharing with the students that are following along and people who are following along what these landscapes look like in their most I guess I don't know what the term would be. Their most sort of real time of year. So being in the winter, like being in the Arctic in January on an expedition, what does the sky look like? What does the ground look like when there's barely any snow? What is because it's so cold, right? Or being in a desert, like the Namib Desert, crossing a canyon in the middle of their summer, peak summer, the extreme heat. What does it feel like on the ground when it's blistering hot, or being in the middle of Death Valley for that matter in July or August, crossing.
what does it feel like?
Oh, I mean, it feels like being in an oven. It feels like being inside an oven. Death Valley, literally, that one, and actually, it's so funny I brought the two of those up at the same time. Death Valley and Namibia, because of the convections, the heat, it's so intense. It's like you're being cooked by convection. It's a very strange and unbelievable sensation. But extremely beautiful. And that's why I like being on foot. Also, it gets me into places that I can't necessarily get into on my mountain bike or other modes of transportation. And I've done some bike trips as well, and some fat bike expeditions in the Arctic in winter as well. But just being on foot is a different thing. I just love it.
The thing like I was in the army in Israel, and we used to train in the desert, and we would stop between, I think it was 2 to 4 because it was too hot, so they would put us under this little tent in the middle of the desert and just let us rest for 2 hours because literally you could die. How do you go in Death Valley? Literally, it has death in the name. It's
Yeah.
the hottest place on earth, and you're running in like July.
Yeah, so in August 2011, myself and a really good buddy of mine, Will, crossed Death Valley National Park from the north end to the south end. I think it was, if memory serves me right, it was about 250 kilometers. We did it completely off road, and it was in a heat wave, and it was extraordinarily hot, but it was a shorter period of time. I think it took us 4 or 5 days. And but when I crossed the Atacama Desert, which was one of the hardest things I've ever done, the Atacama Desert, driest place on earth, 800 miles, 1,200 kilometers from the Peruvian border southward. And I crossed that in the middle of summer, and dude, I literally almost died out there. I mean, the resupplies that I was able to get from my team, because I was navigating through mountains, I was mostly completely off road. Yeah. Those resupplies were every 20, 30, 50 kilometers. So I was going vast distances in extreme heat, almost Death Valley heat, for 20 days. It was crazy difficult. But again, being able to experience that and then, get on a live video conference with schools who are following my expedition, and, and being able to, show them the landscape. Everything's by satellite. Show them the landscape and say, hey guys, this is what 50 degrees Celsius looks like. Here, I'm literally standing right now. Apparently, this is the spot, the driest place on earth, right? And so it's really neat being able to do that. That's why it's so rewarding to me,
And I really want to talk about the charity as well and what you do with the live vlogging. But what happens, I'm just thinking out loud now, one of those resupplies fails for whatever reason. I mean, it's a serious problem in a place like that, driest place on earth.
Well, you know what? That actually happened.
Really?
We mapped these routes out before I go on expeditions for years in advance, right?
Yeah.
And with the Atacama Desert, we were finalizing the route over the course of the last year. And when I showed up there, we had in our minds, one of the days that I was on the expedition, we had in our minds this one resupply that would be about 30 kilometers into my day. So I would leave camp, head out through these mountains, go through, there was a mountain pass, and I believe there was a salt lake that I had to cross. And then I would eventually run into my crew who could finagle their way around in a 4-wheel drive to eventually, this is like sport crew, we're talking about 3 guys, right, in a 4-wheel drive. And that they were going to eventually drive around through a series of mining roads that were out in the middle of nowhere, and then go off-road for, I don't know, however long, driving clear across the desert, but there was this open area where they could get to me. So that was the plan. Well, things had changed in that last few months leading up to the expedition, to the point where when I was running, I got to the 30K mark, and I'm like, this is weird. They're not here, right? So I call them up on my sat phone, and they said, hey, listen, we got you. I was wearing my tracker. Just keep going. We'll eventually, we're gonna stay straight on your bearing. We'll hit your line of trajectory. We'll run into you. We'll find you. We have been stopped by the mining company. They won't allow us to go any further on this road. What the hell? Yeah, we're working on it. Dude, I go 35, 40, 45K. Now I'm at a point where I'm just looking for, like, I had a pack on with all my supplies to survive basically a day. Mm-hmm. But I'm running extremely low on, like, I'm sipping now what's left, right? Because it's getting progressively hotter during the day. I don't even remember, noon, 1 o'clock by now. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to make it, right? And I'm looking for boulders or something that I can use as additional shelter along with what I had with me, a tarp that I had, and I would create a shield from the sun, which I was able to do. And I sat there at the 50K mark, this pile of rocks in my shelter, and I literally thought, I'm going to die out here. Like, I'm just going to dry up and die. And they find people from previous wars, soldiers that are perfectly preserved out there in the desert, right? Just laying there, people that have died.
Really?
And yeah, from the war with Bolivia, would that be somebody on here is going to correct me, in the 1800s. And they have found perfectly preserved, people that have expired out in the desert. And because it's such a dry environment, right, with very little, like no predators, right? They find these perfectly intact bodies. And so all I'm picturing is, oh my God, they're going to find me out here dried up. And And honestly, I felt like I was on my last legs, and I heard I could hear the 4-wheel drive humming in the distance, and they eventually got in. So bad things
The
can
sweet
happen.
sound of cars.
The sweet sound of a diesel engine. So I
Yeah.
mean, bad things can happen, but wow, they saved my life that day for sure. So to answer your question, yes, I mean it can be sketchy for sure if they can't get to you. But on the Arctic expeditions, I'm completely unsupported.
Yeah.
So everything is contained in the sleds or on my back or whatever. And so you're more, it's different. It's cold, right? It's extreme cold. Extreme cold is very difficult. Now, granted, you can put more clothing on, but everything is slowed down in the Arctic in winter. Your ability to do anything slows down. And so menial tasks become huge efforts, right? It's I've been in those situations in the Arctic where I think to myself, I'll keep my big heavy down jacket strapped to my sled, and I'll be moving with lighter clothing even though it's 40, 50 below, because I'm generating heat. But you get to a point where you've been exposed to the cold for so long, you're not generating as much heat, and things start to slow down in your mind and in your body, and you think to yourself, oh, I just need to grab that down jacket. Yeah, I'll get to it in a minute. And it's like, that's just, and you just kind of like everything slows down. And then, so anyhow, that's the way it goes.
Everything's, I don't know if this is quantifiable, but what do you think, in your opinion, is harder to do, the cold expeditions in the Arctic, or the really hot ones in the deserts?
Well, for me, the cold ones for sure. Yeah.
Cold ones are harder.
For me personally, cold ones are harder. Yeah. The hot. I could deal with the extreme heat. I've done it many, many times. It can be really bad sometimes. I've been a disaster. I've been a cramped up ball of spasms because I'm so dehydrated, but I can handle the heat different.
Okay. Even those extreme 45 and maybe 50 degrees Celsius heat versus the minus 30 or 40.
Exactly. I'm not saying it's pleasurable, but I can do it better,
Yeah. Maybe explain to people that don't know what an unsupported trip through the Arctic means.
So unsupported. So the Atacama story, for example, getting a resupply. Although I've got my daily supplies with me, getting a resupply of hydration every 30 kilometers on average, whatever. That's supported. Somebody's out there and they're helping to make it happen, right? Unsupported means you've got your entire life contained on you, in your sled, whatever. You produce the means by which to melt water, everything else. So it's all on you, basically.
So you pre-packaged per day, per calorie, you know exactly what you need to be eating at what time, the equipment,
everything. Yeah.
Wow. And is
probably better than the MREs you had when you were in Israel?
Most likely. So, I mean, when you go on these, actually, let's go back a little bit. How did you get into it? I mean, I know you brought this up in the beginning that I would ask, and I figured this is the time to ask.
Well, it's everybody, because everybody wants to know. I mean, when you hear these things, like, how do you get started into these things? And so I started all this when I was 30. So and so we're going on almost, I'm going to be 52. So 22 years ago, basically.
Don't look at day over 35.
Exactly. and no, but it's been that long, right? And before 30 years of age, I was like a heavy drinker, pack-a-day smoker, unhealthy guy, which is not that uncommon a story when you start to really dig into it when it comes to endurance, right? But I also was someone who was very unhappy and unfulfilled, and in an era before social media, before we had access to media and learning about what else is happening as quickly around the world and being inspired by other things. I was inspired by my younger brother, John, who is a climber, runner, Ironman triathlete, all these things. And I was inspired by his passion for the things that he does, and how it was turning him into someone who was very confident. And this was the late 90s when I first observed these changes in him. And I thought, wow, if I could feel even a little bit like he did, I think my life would be different. And so, I've often made the joke that if he was an electrician, you and I would be doing a podcast about wiring your house today, right? It was just like I followed him in his footsteps because he was so inspiring to me.
Yeah.
And still is. And so that's how I first got into doing outdoors. So it compelled me, obviously, to quit smoking.
Mm-hmm.
It compelled me to do all of the things that I wasn't doing. And then slowly but surely, throughout the early 2000s, I was racing mountain bikes. I got into all that adventure racing, all of these things, and changed my life 180 degrees. Was as uh, had as much conviction for the new things as I was doing and passion for the new things I was doing, like eating healthy and training, as I was in the early days of partying and getting high and everything else. And so, now it was a different scope and a different person. Like it was the strangest sensation to be reborn at 30 years of age, to know, like, I had no idea that I had this big endurance engine like my brother did, and I could keep up with him eventually. It became that way. And that led me to running. And my very first running race was a 100-mile running race in the Yukon, which I won. And I thought to myself, maybe this is what I should do with the rest of my life. And that was in 2004. And I guess you could say the rest is just a series of one crazy footstep after another, no pun intended, where I was doing ultra marathons all over the world, competing in ultra marathons all over the world, and then got this idea to run across the Sahara Desert. And two buddies of mine and I, Charlie and Kevin, the three of us together ran clear across the Sahara Desert from the West Coast to the East Coast. And what was so compelling about that, and we finished it in 2007, took us 111 days, running an average of 70 kilometers a day. There's a documentary film made out of the run. And the documentary at the time, it was exciting for a lot of people because it was sort of a new thing. It wasn't the first running documentary, but it certainly was something that was a little bit different, and the fact that it was an expedition and, Matt Damon made the movie, which obviously helps out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And people started watching it. And in reflection of what we learned when we were out there in the Sahara, I thought, wow, I mean, I was a guy who barely got out of high school and college, and yet I'm learning so much about the world through an adventure. And then this film gets made, which also is a window into subjects and opportunity to see a different place and learn about a different culture, etc. I thought, wow, I think this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I just started doing one expedition after another, and never sacrificing for me what I felt was authentic to me, like wanting to go to places and do true geographic crossings, point A to point B, but do them in a way that was meaningful to me, and to eventually, just one thing led to another, all the schools that would follow along with me and everyone else, And so here I am all these years later, 31 expeditions, I think, later, and you and I are talking on Roy's podcast,
Do you think that Sahara Desert crossing, was that like a pivotal point in your mind? Because I'm assuming the whole thing happened pretty organically. Like you just started running, and then the more you ran, the more you're like, you know what, this is something I really like doing, and maybe I can do this professionally. And like, was that the point where you made the switch? Like, you know what, this is actually a career. This is something I can do versus I'm doing this on the side as an amateur because I enjoy doing it.
No. So when I was doing the ultras, racing the ultras,
yeah,
I was, let's say by that point, that's 35 years of age, right? And I was living in a small renovated sandwich shop, which was my apartment in Chelsea, Quebec, where I live, and had recently met my future wife, Kathy. And all I had was a futon, my mountain bikes, weights. It wasn't about money or anything. I didn't really have anything, but I was loving what I was doing. And so I was fortunate, I think, in some ways, to it never even crossed my mind that could be a job.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I was doing it because running was teaching me things about myself that I didn't learn or know anywhere else. And so I continued to run to learn more about myself. And whatever it was that I was learning was applicable to every other part of my life. You know what I'm saying? Like resilience, for example, or or not talking myself out of trying new things, but instead talking myself into taking risks and doing things. And an appreciation for the fact that really I only had one life, and I spent the first 30 years of it, thinking that I would never do anything. So I said to myself, well, what the hell, for the next 30 years, do as much as you can, And so it became about that. And then one thing led to another, and it became a job. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't like that. Like, we were running across the Sahara, and I thought, "Ooh, okay, this could be a great way to make a living."
Yeah.
And there's no, no, it was not like, it was instead, when we finished, thinking to myself, I cannot believe that literally I began running less than 4 years before completing the run across the Sahara. And I was a pack-a-day smoker 7 years before, completing the Sahara. And that it's not a thing about an individual. It's the fact that everyone is capable of the extraordinary. And that I knew that piece was infinitely compelling to me. That there was a way to take this and let others know, especially young people, that they've got their entire lives to do amazing things, but you only have one. It's not like a video game. There's not 2 or 3. So you got to make the most of it. Yeah, you got to make the most of it while you can. I mean, everybody's got setbacks. Everybody has things that happen that, but I'm just saying, it doesn't have to be perfect, because it never is. But, knowing that at least we can extract some awesomeness on the one trip on the planet that we have, that was going to be a mission kind of thing. And whatever that meant and whatever it became is what it would be.
For some reason, I don't know if this is specific to running, but it seems like there is people like yourself, right? Super inspiring. And then there's Rich Roll and David Goggins and a lot of other guys that kind of took running and specifically like ultra marathon running, like these long expeditions, doing like, I think he did like 5 Ironmans in 5 days, like all these crazy but really inspiring things. And
right.
It's a similar story where it's like, I was unhealthy. I didn't like my life. I didn't like my job. And then I decided to just take on running one day. And then gradually this snowball effect became what it is now.
Right.
And unlike other sports where people usually start them at a young age, this seems like something that is more particular to people maybe after 30 or so.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think that there's a lot of young people now that are definitely into ultra running. I think that you could be right statistically. You could be right, but I do some race organizing as well where I live. Organize a series of trail races and ultra marathons in non-COVID years, and I see a lot of people that are already running a ton. I have this foundation, Impossible to Possible, where we take young people on expeditions around the world, the ages of 16 to 21 years of age. And they're running-based expeditions that are learning-based. So we would visit a place like the Amazon jungle and then teach a curriculum of biodiversity through the adventure of these young people to tens of thousands of kids that are following along in schools, right? We get flooded with applicants, kids 16, 17, 18, that are avid trail runners. They're into this. So I think we're in a new time. I think we're in a time where, when I was younger, like even climbing, my brother and I used to do in the early 2000s a ton of ice climbing, and back then when I started ice climbing, I'd never even heard of it until my brother took me the first time. Never heard of it. Now it's like a very normal thing. Go on Instagram, you can find 5 billion photos of ice climbing. Right?
Yeah.
So I think we're in an era where young people have access to so many more sports. I know that my daughters, they're 12 and 9. They cross-country ski, both skate and classic, so both styles.
Wow.
They flat water paddle. They trail run a ton. They fast pack. They do all the things that my wife Kathy and I do. And they're young kids, right? So when I was a young kid, I wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
And so I think times are changing, and we're getting exposed to more, and therefore we have access to more. And I think ultra running, I think I love about ultra running and watching it now, and these younger people getting into it, is the speed at which they're doing things. It's just mind blowing. I just cannot believe how fast some of these people are. It's just fantastic.
Well, it's inspiring to hear that I think everyone is looking at this Gen Z or whatever younger kids coming up that they're in their phones, they're on video games, they're all into tech. They're not interested in the outdoors, and they're I don't know, you can say spoiled and all these other things that people are kind of looking down on the younger generation. So when you're saying that you get flooded with applicants that just, I want to go on the Amazon, I want to go on these deserts, I want to go trail running, that's amazing.
You got to consider, Roy, that we're measuring these things now.
Yeah.
Nobody was measuring this in the 70s. Nobody was, when you're driving with your parents in the car and they got the windows rolled up and there's both smoking, and then you got, the car, you're sitting in a hot box of smoke, right? And then somebody's got to crack the window. I mean, okay, so what's unhealthier, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just a different time. Mm-hmm. Nobody was, as kids, I grew up on a small farm. And so, of course, you're outside all day because there's nothing to do inside. There was no video games. There was nothing in the 70s and 80s, but sort of, getting outside. But I think there's a huge amount of kids that still do that. I think it's just that we know more as well. We have more information and access to information. So we are aware that more people are playing, video games and all that. But I don't think that it's the be all and end all to and generation defining. I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't think it is,
Do you look for any specific kids for these programs?
No,
or just anyone that's interested?
I'm not on the selection committee, so we'll get the applicants, and then the selection committee determines who's going based on various criteria. Being the founder of the organization, that's obviously a role I can't take, but we get kids from all over, all different backgrounds, everything. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. Where did the idea come from? Is that you just wanted the younger generation to take part in, in the outdoors?
Well, when I finished the Sahara, my wife and I talked about it and met up with a buddy of mine, Bob Cox, was the co-founder of Impossible Possible and the executive director. And I knew that the experience in the Sahara, that I was a guy, like I said to you before, that barely got out of high school, right? Like I'm talking, rolling with the D's and F's and everything else. And I just thought I had an incapability of learning. Mm-hmm. But then being on this expedition, I'm learning about culture, economics, agriculture, water crisis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm thinking, wow, I had a voracious appetite for wanting to learn. And yes, I can learn and have a desire to learn. So maybe there's a way to apply adventure to make learning compelling in a different way. And so that's the three of us decided, let's do this thing. Let's create these expeditions. And it was a process before we came up with the name and everything, but that's where the idea was born, basically on the shores, if you will, of the Red Sea, right? And so I think we're at 13 or 14, I always lose count, youth expeditions we've done so far, and all over the world, Rajasthan, a couple to the Amazon, the Arctic, all over.
Wow. How difficult, because you said that you live stream it, and then you live stream also like some of the expeditions that you've done. How hard is it live streaming, in these remote places with probably zero connection?
Well, I'm using satellite, and so it's bandwidth, and satellite is data heavy and expensive.
Okay.
And you have to have the gear, right? And so I'm very fortunate that, I've had support from my sponsors, Network Innovations, who's helped us over the years. And then, with the advent of, for example, Facebook Live, it's made our lives going into classrooms a little bit easier because we can use that platform to communicate with students in a live telecast. Mm-hmm. But we all have, for many years, used various softwares, video conferencing softwares, et cetera, as well. And so it's complicated. We bring the right people on the expedition. The youth expeditions, you'll have 5 youth ambassadors and then 10 faculty, right? And that includes filmmakers, teachers, experts in the area of the subject that we're teaching. And so it's much more intense education. It's daily modules. It's very robust. But then on my own expeditions, it's super lean. obviously running the Sahara, we had an elaborate film crew, and I've had film crews on other expeditions, but for the most part, we try to keep it as lean and light as possible.
And parents are cool with their kids going to the Amazon and all these remote places?
It always amazes me that we're allowed to take these young people to these places. No, I'm just kidding. They know that our safety protocols are of the utmost importance. And for sure, like, I mean, the Amazon, everybody always points to that one, but I mean, you're in the middle of the Amazon jungle, and they were trekking daily from one indigenous community to the next in the central Amazon. So it was like,
That's
there were
wild.
snakes everywhere. You should have seen the snakes. They were everywhere. It's crazy.
Big ones.
Big ones, and spiders too, and all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, the Amazon is real. The Amazon is, I always, because I love the outdoors, and but I haven't done anything massive as far as an expedition or anything. And I always admit, when I see people going through, like, trekking through the Amazon, I'm like, I would much rather do a trek in Antarctica in -30 than trekking through, like, the Amazon with the mosquitoes and the alligators and the anacondas. It's just, I was like, yeah, I'll take Antarctica.
Well, I've been in the Amazon a number of times, and it's an amazing place for sure. But Antarctica, it's funny how people will mention Antarctica, and when we went to the South Pole. When we went to the South Pole, we actually broke the world record for getting there the fastest possible. And what was so funny about that is that, we had brought with us a bunch of extra satellite gear and everything so that we'd be able to upload content and do the whole school thing. Yeah. And it really wasn't sort of, the priority. The priority was communicating the expedition with the schools. And of course, we just had an absolute blast. We laughed the entire way. There's 3 of us, me and my buddy Kevin and my buddy Richard. And all of us have done Arctic expeditions. And so when you're in the Arctic, if you're going in the winter in the Arctic, it's dark, or the sun sets very quickly, depending on the time of winter that you're there. There's polar bears to deal with. So You're never sleeping. You're always scared. It's insanely cold and humid. And when we went to the South Pole, I mean, it was definitely, it was difficult, but the sun was always up in the sky, always, and there was no polar bears. So you could sleep.
That's nice.
It was
and the ground isn't moving beneath you, right? Like in the Arctic, the ground is always moving.
Well, only if you're on sea ice, right? A lot of Arctic stuff as well. There's a lot of amazing places in the Arctic that are islands and, land-based projects as well. So that part you're okay. But, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned, it's just funny. I had a conversation with someone about something similar the other day, where if you live regardless of where you live, but let's say if you live in the US in a certain city, you have a bubble. You grew up in a certain way, in a certain family, on a certain street, with certain people, eating certain foods, exposed to certain culture. And if you've only been there, you think that is the world. Like, for the most part, you'll be like, that's how everyone is everywhere else, and that's what everyone acts like. And then you go travel, you're like, oh shit, people act very differently, and they have different cultures and different foods and different priorities, and they interact differently. And I wonder if that's part of, obviously, when you go to these countries, it's very remote for the most part, but, like, do you get a lot of interaction with people? Like, do you get any outside information or outside exposure to the actual running?
Well, the cultural aspect and component of what I do is obviously it's the most compelling, because I have friends now all over the world. I don't know how many countries I've been in, 70. And I have friends all over the world in some of the remotest parts of the world, which is really interesting. Mohammed Iksa, who was the expedition leader of the Running the Sahara expedition, he's been here to Chelsea to stay with us,
Wow.
And it's just been so great to establish these friendships. I'd say, obviously that's a high point whenever possible. I mean, obviously there's certain times when you aren't seeing anyone. There's vast sections of deserts or Arctic regions where there's just simply no one. But those human connections are critically important to share with schools and to share other cultures and lives, with students who are following along. Mongolia is one that comes to mind, running across the Gobi Desert. I soloed it, and it was over 2,000 kilometers, minimal resupplies, like I did in the Atacama. And while I was there, I had a film crew, and they weren't with me. So I would head off for my day, and I would get my resupplies whenever I got them. And I was doing, I don't know, 60, 70 kilometers a day.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be off shooting stuff. And sometimes they'd be gone from camp for 2 or 3 days. And they would come back because they would go to these remote communities and capture stories and talk with people and learn about this cultural event that happens in Mongolia in the time of year. I was there, I think, in June, July. It was July of 2013, where Nadam, it was happening, which is a festival which makes heroes of runners and wrestlers and horse racers. There's a series of competitions, and it goes on all across the country. It's an amazing cultural event. Wow. And so we were sharing those stories as I was making my run. My run became the thread of the stories of the people in Mongolia and Gobi Desert as a snapshot in time of what was happening. And I've made so many friends in Mongolia. I'll be taking clients actually back to a region of there with my guiding company. I'll be taking a group of clients there in summer 22, I'm hoping. So here's something that I've learned, though, in all these expeditions, is that we have a lot more in common than we do different. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, and I think that someone who for the first 30 years of their life didn't really travel much at all, and then starts going around the world with that 30-year-old lens of living in the Ottawa Valley and then, in Ontario, and then going and visiting, remote Western Libya, or being in the Amazon jungle or any of these other places and hanging out and learning from people, but also laughing and sharing meals and all this stuff. And it instantly, like a lightning bolt, hit me that, wow, I mean, you can live on the western edge of the Libyan border flanking Algeria and be laughing at the exact same fart jokes. I mean, we're all laughing at the same things, And so I love the fact that there's this connection with all of humanity that I believe exists. And it's something that is it's visceral. Like, I've felt that before so many times, even though we all may live vastly different lives and have vastly different, cultures and values, whatever. At the end of the day, still there's this string of connection that we all have,
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like when you travel, if you travel correctly, because you can also travel, I mean, I don't know if correct is the right word, but there's a way to travel where you're almost in a bubble, right? Like, you'll go only to the tourist areas. You'll only maybe talk to other English speakers. You won't really immerse yourself in the culture too much. And you kind of leave the place like, oh, I had a great vacation, but you don't know much else about the country. Like, you didn't actually learn too much, which is, that's fine. That's one way to travel. But and I'm guilty of that as well. I've done that plenty of times, but I feel like there's something, and this is something I want to experience more and do more of, is go to these countries, wherever country it is, and just try to immerse yourself a little bit more. Like, maybe eat some of the more local stuff, try to talk to locals, try to go to where the locals go. Again, like, some places are obviously dangerous. You shouldn't, but if possible, like, definitely that's something I want to do more of.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, being sort of, in and learning. Did you ever watch Parts Unknown?
Of course.
Yeah. So you see the way that Bourdain just kind of, I mean, even the guy was a genius. And
so much swag. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's just the greatest of all times. And he would, the way he would share stories were, I found, in a lot of ways, very compelling. And in the way that he took you on a journey, and you got to see people living very normal lives, wanting better lives for their families, wanting a good meal, wanting shelter, wanting all the things that we want. Sometimes we take for granted, or some things that we work towards. And some of the episodes that come to mind, the Iran episode, I thought was really interesting. I thought that the West Virginia episode was amazing.
The West Virginia one was unbelievable.
Yeah,
because he went there in such a highly politically charged time and very partisan, and where everyone is writing off these people. And he was like, I'm coming with zero judgment. I just want to immerse myself in your world, learn from you. And according to him, he received nothing but love from
Yeah,
people there.
exactly.
Amazing.
And I think we forget, how there is. I've always believed that people are, there's good and evil in the world, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. But I believe that people are generally good. I just do. I think that and I think that when you're traveling, it is to see the goodness in others. You know,
Yeah.
much more than fearing others.
Yeah. I think if the statement you made was not correct, um, I think we would see the world in a much worse than it currently is. Because for the most part, obviously, there's things happening all the time that are horrific, but for the most part, it is relatively okay. Like you can travel the places, countries are running, economies are churning, everything is relatively okay. Again, like crime is happening everywhere, atrocities are happening, but just overall, I don't want to
Yeah,
say that it's
overall,
all. I don't want to say
no,
that
no,
it's all gravy.
not all coming up roses, but
Yeah, but if we were all bad, as maybe some people like to paint, it would just be much worse, much
yeah,
worse. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Let's go back to expeditions a little bit. So,
yeah.
do, I just want to talk about the mental aspect of it. Is there parts when during these expeditions that are extremely difficult, where you just hit these points of despair, where you have to just go within and tell yourself like, "Hey, I have to do this," or what kind of mental gymnastics do you have to go through sometimes to convince yourself to finish, if at all? Maybe that doesn't happen to you.
Well, I would say, you have products that you've brought to market as an entrepreneur, and there's been times when you are really not sure. You've taken your life savings, you've put it on the line. Everybody's told you you're crazy,
Yeah.
but it's something in you told you it was the right thing to do, and you don't know if it's going to sell or not. You're putting it out there, you're putting yourself out there, your reputation, your family, everything is on the line for this thing that you truly believe in, but there's something in you that compels you to do it. Whatever that is that you do is the same thing that I do when I hit a wall. And I have the same walls on the expeditions that you do, or that anyone does that's doing a job that challenges them, or their life becomes a challenge. It's all the same thing. Expeditions are just it's just a different pasture. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So and for me personally, um, when those things happen, I remind myself that I was the one that chose to do this,
Mhm.
as I'm sure you have with the products. You remind yourself that you got into this because you believed in it, so you own it. That's where the buck stops. And so when I'm on these expeditions, I remind myself, well, okay, listen, down with the dramaticism. Like, okay, of course it's difficult. So we accept the drama, but don't get too serious with yourself about the drama right now because you chose to be here. It's something you chose to do. So now it's up to you. Do you continue or do you stop? Everything else is extraneous information. It's unimportant. The only important decision make is continue or stop. And if you want to talk about it after, well, I stopped because of. That's fine, but that does not negate the decision. Stop or go. You know what I'm saying? I distill it down to that. And then once I commit to the stop or go and I'm committed to, then everything else follows. So hopefully, most times I commit to, all right, I'm going to keep going.
Mhm.
Now let's talk about in my head to myself how hard it is, or oh, my feet are killing me, or my back is sore, or whatever. But I'm going to go as far as I possibly can, you know?
So that's what I'm interested in. I'm because there has to be, and I know I've talked to a few adventurers, people who do these incredible expeditions, and they tend to play it down like there's nothing special about them. Um, but I wonder what that inner dialogue that you have is. It I want to quit, or is it this is painful, but that's all it is. It's pain, and I'm just gonna go. I'm going through
Well,
the fire.
it's like anything in life that where there's like a million things going on in your mind. Like I could be out and my foot's killing me, and oh my god, this foot is killing me. I wonder what I'm going to eat at camp tonight. I wonder, you know what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to eat this, that, and the other, and then I'm going to sleep. Well, then I'm going to do that conference call with those students, and then your brain goes to different places.
Hmm.
It's just it becomes and I get it. You talk to people and they see it. It becomes normalized after a while. when you're doing these things. And so what seems so maybe out there and crazy to you, but to people that do these things, it's kind of a normalized thing.
Yeah.
It's just what we love to do, and it's just what we do, right? And I think anybody that has faced any challenge in life, it's all similar. That's why I like to say, there's an explorer in every single person. It's just how you explore. Is it through music, writing, basket weaving, painting? It could be anything. It doesn't matter what it is, right?
But people aren't asking basket weavers to come have TED Talks. You know what I mean? Like,
that's not, that may or may not be true. You see artists, like I see artists. And to me, I've always been the most impressed with artists of all kinds. Because at the end of the day, the thing that never disappears or that gives us recollection of history of what it means to be a human being is art, right? Think about it, cave art, cave wall art. I mean, there's nothing left from those times, very little things. When's the last time you saw a Model T driving by your house, right?
Yeah.
The things, but to have music and to have art from previous generations, there is an amazing quality of resiliency that comes with that. So I've always been amazed at how artists the struggle to create is extraordinary to me. And so again, here I am looking at what they're doing, saying, I don't know how they do it. And then, other people may say that about the things that I do or that others do, right? So I think it's like the grass is always greener kind of thing, or maybe that's not the right application of saying.
The ice is always wider.
Yeah, exactly. It's just more compelled. You're compelled by what others are doing. I guess,
Well, I think we have a fascination with people that push themselves to the absolute limit. And that's true for, athletes as well, maybe MMA fighters or basketball players or Tiger Woods, like people that are at the pinnacle of their sport. That's a very compelling story. But, there's so many TED Talks, right, with people that have climbed Everest or that have gone to the North Pole, the South Pole, or like yourself that have run all these different deserts. And I think we're fascinated by these people because there is a creative pursuit that happens as well. It broadens our horizons to what can happen, and it inspires us. Like, oh shit, like this person did that. That's actually possible. I never even thought about that. Wow, maybe I could do X, Y, Z. And before, I didn't really think about it. But there is a fascination because, again, there's so many TED Talks and books and podcasts with people that have explored, the depth and then the highest places and the coldest places of the earth. And people are attracted to that.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that, and I think it's you got to go one step further by saying people are attracted to one another's ventures in life and what they're doing. No matter what it is that they're doing.
There's a video of you in the desert, and you have, for lack of a better, you have half your leg is peeled off essentially. And
you're talking about the Blister in the desert. Yeah. That was totally infected. It was crazy. Yeah.
So that's the question. How do most people will be like, look, like I'm, my leg, look at my leg. Like I got to go home. I got to go to the doc. I got to do something. And you just keep going.
Well, long story, but we ended up with antibiotics in that. I had antibiotics, and Bob, my best friend, the guy that co-founder Impossible Possible, he looked at my foot and he's like, dude, it looks really bad, right? And we were in a small mining community in the Atacama where I had stopped because of that injury and drove cross country for hours through the desert to get to this tiny little mining community. And a doctor in that community looked at my foot and I'm telling him what we're doing through translation, although he did speak English, but anyhow. And he looked at my foot and he said, well, you're not running anymore, basically. And my foot was just huge and it was just disgusting. It was all weepy and everything. And so wrap my foot up and we walk outside and we're getting back into the 4-wheel drive to go back to the desert to where I had stopped. Yeah. And Bob looked at me and said, you aren't stopping, are you? And I said, no. And so I woke up the next morning and Bob had helped to wrap my foot up. And we took a pair of shoes and we cut the shoe at the top in half so that it could accommodate this swollen foot that was wrapped in gauze. Mm-hmm. And then it was like a big giant clown shoe. And I thought to myself, okay, I'll go as far as I can. Yeah. until it hurts like crazy, until I can't take the pain anymore. And then I'll stop. And when they take the gauze off, if it looks worse than it did when I started, I think it might mentally break me, and that would be the end of the expedition. Because I can't just keep, I don't want to lose this foot because of this thing.
Yeah.
But if it looks the same, I think I can keep going. So get up the next day, wrap it up, jam the foot in the shoe, off I go. I get to about a marathon distance, a little further.
Wow.
And I'm like, the level of pain was so insane that it went from pain to like a tickly, itchy feeling. Like it transcended stabbing and went into this other world of pain. Like anyhow, like electric shocky. So anyhow, I stopped and we set camp for the night. And he's unwrapping my foot, and I'm thinking, oh man. And he's like, doesn't look as bad as I thought it would look. And boom, that was it. Mentally, I was changed. Next day I woke up, they wrapped my foot. I did 70, 70, 70, 70. And I was just cranking out big days after that. And I got to the end. And by the time I got to the end of that expedition, that foot had healed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that.
There you go. So there was, which,
yeah.
So,
I don't know. I think 99% of people would have stopped. But like I said, I think the people that do this are definitely the 1% that can. But I don't know, maybe I could be wrong. What's your favorite coffee? This is the last question. I know that we got to.
What's my favorite coffee? Are you planting that one on purpose? Are you trying to do that on purpose? Because I have my own coffee. We've been doing a series of roasts with our guiding company, Capik One. So it's KAPIK and the number 1.com, Capik1.com. And our coffee is all small farmer, small co-op, fair trade, and we have a dark roast. Nice. Of the 4 roasts that we have a dark roast, Arctic Dark, and it's by far and away my favorite coffee now on the planet. And really? People say, what the heck are you doing with a coffee company? And I'm like, well, it's just an emerging of the things we love, adventuring coffee. And every expedition we've been on, whether it's through the Youth Foundation or through my own expeditions, we always say, look, did anybody bring the coffee? Because guess what? There's no expedition if there's no coffee, and that's just how it was born. So we decided to make our own coffee, and there you go. So that's our favorite.
Coffee is amazing. Even like throughout COVID, like everything was closed, but you would see people line up outside of coffee shops, 6, 7 in the morning. You have to have coffee. You just got to start your way.
Got to do it.
Ray, I want to thank you so much, man. This was awesome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was great being here.
Where can people find more about you, more about the charity? Give us all the information.
So my website has all the information and links. So just Zahab.com. And I think there's links inside my bio. There's a bio page and there's links to Capik One, to the charity, etc. You can read about my expeditions. There's content on there. And then you can find me on all social media platforms, which there's links from my website. But Instagram, I'm on Instagram, all the same ones that everybody's on.
Okay. Do you have any future expeditions coming up?
I do, but I can't share them with you because that would be jinxing. That's my superstition. Till I'm ready to go.
All right.
So COVID is over. We'll do it on the next time you have me on.
Can't wait, man. Sounds awesome.
All right.
All right, Ray. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You as well. Thanks.